Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Explicit Measures podcast with Tommy, Seth, and Mike. I don't know why I introduce myself every time. I guess I have to. This is the three of us.
You can't just ignore the fact that you're a person and I'm a person and Tommy's a person.
I guess. With the
and not everybody knows who we are.
It's true.
So,
I hope by now it's
right.
episode 91.
It's a good intro.
I hope by episode 91 you know at least who we are. Maybe if this is your first time joining us, thank you for joining us for the first time. We appreciate it.
Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for coming.
Appreciate it.
Seth, you're missing
intro.
your catchphrase.
Oh yeah.
I'm not missing anything, Tommy.
He's just waiting for us.
There's a pause. There's
a okay.
Build suspense with some things. Happy Tuesday.
There we are.
There it is. So
I forget sometimes what day it is.
Oh my gosh.
But it is Tuesday, and it's a happy one, gentlemen. Glad to be back after the long weekend.
So we were talking just before the phone call about music you listen to, and I was like, oh man, I love EDM music. That's like my jam. And what do you listen to, Tommy, if you're working on stuff? What do you listen to?
So I listen to the podcast.
Listen to our podcast?
Yeah, to get the views up, and also
just on repeat.
Just on repeat.
Amazing.
Listen to this fantastic podcast called Explicit Measures.
Yeah,
on
repeat.
That's amazing.
Talk radio. I used to do like rap or
baseball.
Classical.
It's baseball talk radio, right?
It absolutely is.
Yeah.
There's really nothing else.
There's no other real podcast.
Yeah, but any other actual music will get me too far down rabbit holes, which I guess really doesn't help because that happens anyways. But it's hard to get out.
It just gets you down a rabbit hole faster than a talking. I would have a hard time listening to someone talk and focusing on what I'm doing. I would just get distracted. I would get more distracted, I think, by the talking than I would being able to do my work. I don't know if I can do that.
Lyrics mess me up. Like,
it's true.
I was a huge when I was doing a lot of coding, EDM fan. Like
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly right.
The only one I could never like. I met a guy at one place that was into hard metal, and it's almost the same thing because you can't even hear like whoa 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 whoa.
Yeah,
and just and I don't have a beat right. This guy was a drummer, but like towards the end, like your legs are going underneath your desk and you're pounding on the thing. It's like hey, get your blood flowing. I've done the full gambit, but yeah, anything with lyrics messes me up.
Yeah, I can't do lyrics as much.
I
actually have a playlist made just for songs without lyrics, and I keep collecting songs without lyrics and putting them in that bucket, so I can then, as I find them, I can then use them for like work things. So that's definitely a thing. I guess not so much music now that you're doing management stuff. So
yeah, it's a little difficult to like talk to somebody and you're like, hey, we really need to talk to bow 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 bow.
Your performance is a little bit lacking. Whatever the EDM's doing. Wait, hold on. There's the drop part. I love the drop part.
Yeah, that would be good.
Amazing. There's some events coming up this week. We probably should pay a little bit of time to that. Tommy, there's
this week. How about today?
Also today, yes.
So there is the Power Platform 24 virtual conference. The three of us at 4 p.m. Central today, Tuesday, the 15th of March, are doing an Ask Me Anything about Power BI, I guess. So if you want to register, I guess it's
not even going to be about Power BI. It's going to be about
so if it's actually about
and
Power
gardening.
BI and not related to the podcast, we got nothing for you. So register for that. I'm going to send the link in the live chat. And then if you're listening and it's also still Tuesday before 4 p.m., register. And then there will also be a link to, if you want to ask a question beforehand to kind of get first dibs, there'll be a form to do that as well. So that's exciting. It's going to be a little fun. We'll see if we actually get people that come.
We had some questions show up beforehand this time, which was great. We love when people send us questions before we get it started. So that just makes it even better for us. We just enjoy that, and we love engaging with the community. The community is really fun. A lot of really sharp people. I feel like I'm a better person. I learn a lot from the community and what they ask. So yeah, feel free to bring some questions. Tom, you're going to put the link in the chat window?
Just did.
Awesome. Yep. Thank you very much for doing that. In addition to that, we actually are hosting Steve Campbell from Oh, I forgot the name of the company that he works for. He's out of London now. He just moved back over there. He was over here in our area, but Steve is now going through and doing a 3-part series on data modeling basics. Just kind of like, what is a star schema? How do you make stuff like a star schema? Why do we build things a certain way in data modeling? So we're going to do part 2 today around noon. I think it's noon Central Standard Time. And then part 3 will happen tomorrow. It's Wednesday, noon as well. And then I think this Friday, for anyone who's following along, on Friday we have Matthias doing PBI tools. For those of you who don't know what PBI tools is, it's a tool that allows you to decompile a Power BI file into its components, its pieces. The same way you would do like a BIM file or you'd use Tabular Editor, you can actually save a Power BI file into all the components of it, and then you can reconstruct it. So it's more like a CI/CD pipeline type tool that you can use to decompress and compress files. So really, really cool. We're very happy to have him on the podcast, or actually on the YouTube channel on Friday. So anyways, a lot of stuff going on this week.
Exciting.
Yeah.
Good old Steve Campbell, man. Guys,
Steve's good, man.
Amazing tools that guy, man. That built.
Yeah, I use the external tools. So he has made the split PBX file. So if you have a PBX and model together, he'll split it for you with some PowerShell. He also has the Reconnect. What's it technically called? Is it Reconnect, or what's it called, the other tool there? I can't remember the name of it, but it allows you to take a live connection and strip out a live connection off of a PBX file and allow you to repoint it locally to a local data model. So you can kind of repoint, and that's one of the things you can't change. Yeah, because once you've connected a thin report to a Power BI data model, you can't change it from anything else other than what's in the Power BI.com service. So you can't develop locally on your machine. So this tool allows you to then remove that connection and then use it locally on your machine. So very interesting stuff there as well. Awesome.
I feel like we should pay homage real quick to a Mr. Greg Baldini.
We got a talking to after our last episode. We'll say that.
We did?
We did.
Yeah. So after we did our DAX hacks that you may not be aware of, calculated columns and all that.
I know. It's fighting words.
Greg took a little issue, or I guess
passion to it.
I think he was a little offended that we didn't ask him who he said his middle name is Dax Hacks.
Yeah.
So
he had some so he was chatting with us. He's got some amazing Dax hacks.
Like, just redo an episode, or is this like
this is Dax hacks part 2?
I think it's a website. So I'm gonna name a few, but I'm not gonna explain them at all, just because I had to write them down.
Whoa, Tommy! Don't give away the beans.
Hold on. No, I wouldn't say any of them. Just say, hey, Baldini schooled us. He sent us some really good ideas.
Yes,
they're coming in the next episode.
We're gonna do another episode. We're gonna do Dax hacks too. Yeah,
okay.
Don't. Yeah, we got a whole other episode for this one.
We have to be able to explain.
Can't give away everything. So
I know.
Give away the secret sauce.
Awesome. But he gave us, like, I don't know, 6 of them. I think I understood about 4 of them.
Like 15.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Thanks, Greg.
Really, really good stuff. So we're gonna
if you want to school us, because we're just we're just talking heads, feel free to reach out.
Yeah, go to Power BI Tips /podcast and put your DAX hacks there.
Yeah.
But it was really good. So I will say this: the techniques he's using are very impressive. I did not know a lot of these. I had heard of them a couple times, but I hadn't seen them implemented. So we will for sure revisit DAX hacks. Greg, thank you very much for keeping us honest here. We will redo that again, and we're going to discuss these things at more length and in detail. And we'll all probably have to do homework to figure out, understand how they work. Because
why don't we just make them do our user group? There's a session.
That would be a great. Yeah, there's enough DAX hacks to do a whole session around things like this. So we'll have to reach out to him, see how he feels about it. So I like that idea. That's really good. So let's transition over to our actual topic of the day, which I think will be an interesting topic. It's around, as a role, a role of a job, your job, right? So is your job in consulting, or is your job like inside an organization, right? So you may be internal consulting for your company, but the idea here is, if you're a consultant, or if you're, let's call it this way, if you're W-2 or 1099, right? So a 1099 means you're a consultant and someone pays you to show up to do things. And then if you're a W-2, you're hired by a company and you're part of that organization. So our conversation today is really around 1099 versus W-2, whatever that conversation is. So let's just kick it off there. Tommy, just kind of give us an introduction. Where are you thinking we're going to take this topic today?
Well, hopefully not to taxes.
Hopefully not to
So, but
Texas. It's
yeah,
coming though, but not
I
this
think
topic.
I think this question comes. It's come up a lot in our conversations from our own experiences, but it's I think framed around for a Power BI Pro, long term, short term, is what are the distinct differences in terms of if you had two identical people, one went to consulting, one worked solely in house, what would they look like after 5 years? Would one have a better skill set? Would one be more
Hmm.
ready to for the next step?
Okay, that's not where I was going to take this, but it's a good place to go. I like it.
I'm really intrigued to see where you're gonna take it then. So, but basically, like, is not as is one better than the other? Do we have that opinion? What do you learn in one that you would never get in the other? Could you get those skills in one of those environments? And really, just how different are they for a pro?
So here's a caveat question, right? I th- I know myself. Mike is still consult. Tommy, have you consulted before?
Um, on the side,
Currently, yeah.
Okay, so
yeah,
so smaller. You're on. So there's going to be nuance to this conversation, I think, which there always is. But like,
And
I
Seth, you've
think
done consulting for a number of
yeah,
years. Yeah.
yeah. So I was consulting for 5 years or so in a. I'd still call it a small firm,
Yeah.
yeah,
right? I think there's a difference, a distinction, and we might not have like the full picture between like a smaller consulting firm
hmm
versus large
yeah,
and consulting on your own, like running your
Yep.
own thing or being your own consultant,
Yep.
and then the FTE, which you could delineate into small and large companies as well, right? But as we walk through here, benefits of one to the other, I think I'll be referencing probably some of the layers more directly because I know them very well, and anecdotally I know like the large firm kind of stuff too.
Yeah.
But typically in my work experience, I've always been in a small to medium sized company.
I've worked in a very large company, but I feel like very large companies also break down into business units, and business
Mhm,
units then kind of act like more of that medium to small. You
mhm.
can't manage
Sure.
one entire company through a massive group. I mean, it just doesn't work very well. But I mean, I've worked for a Fortune 100 company. I've worked for a couple small ones. I've worked as a consulting for a consulting company, and now I own my own consulting company. So I kind of spread the gamut on the consulting pieces of things.
I'm going to be interested when you guys speak on the consulting side, especially working for an agency, how much I'll, I guess, get from my previous experience when I worked at a digital marketing firm. And
Okay.
basically, so I am interested to see if there's any correlations or anything that there's overlap. For myself, the only real true like at an agency working was out of digital marketing,
Yep.
doing analytics for them, worked for a larger company, worked for a medium sized company now, and then I do the LLC solely on the side.
Yep.
So that's kind of the experience that I bring. But yeah, I think you guys met at a consulting firm,
We actually
and
met at the
that's
user group, and then we
the
kind of,
user group.
with your forces combined, we became Seth and Mike at our consulting firm for a number of
If you-
years.
Bum, 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 bum.
Did you
Wah, 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 wah,
start
wah,
in
wah.
yeah? Did you start in Power BI at the consulting firm?
No, I started Power BI tips at my company that I was working at the time. I was working at the time. I
Yeah,
was working at
right out of the gate.
right out of the gate. Like Seth and I think I knew Seth from the user group. The user group started very
Mhm.
early, right? Power BI
Yeah.
started. They were like user groups, and so very early on, I think they had user groups. I was trying to figure out how to get involved because I was at the beginning of the program. Again, I have a couple downloads on my machine where it was Power BI Designer back in 2015, and then it changed very quickly over to Power BI Desktop. So I remember that happening. I think when the user group started, Seth and I met there, and then we happened like I think we knew kind of each other. We probably talked a little bit. I mean, I've talked way too much, like always, but then we went to Seattle for the very first Business Insight Summit. I convinced my company to let me go. Seth was there, and I talked to Seth. I was like, I kind of one of the only people I knew there at the group at the session. Like, dude, I'm gonna build this website. And he's like, yeah, okay. And I was like, I'm gonna make it. I'm gonna do this thing. He's like, you should do it. You should definitely, if you're passionate about it and you can kind of keep it up and do it, you should totally do it. And I was like, yeah. And then I left, and then I started March that year. I mean, I think the Insight Summit was around March, April timeframe or something like that. But like right around March is when I said, yeah, I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna start it. And then I started the website at that time, and I just kept running it for a whole year. I think that was
And then
around
there was
2016.
this part where I was like, "Hey, Mike, I've been reading your blogs. Do you have anybody reviewing those?" Nah,
Yeah.
man, I
No,
just throw them out.
I just throw 'em out. I just do it.
Can I can I can I read? Can I review? Would you mind if I polished them up a little bit?
Yeah, they're pretty raw in the beginning there.
Right?
So
Mike's like, "Yes,
sure.
please,
So that was kind of the beginning of the
yes."
website. So back to our topic though. So I definitely I would say I feel comfortable with the small firm, maybe even I would call it maybe even medium firm for consulting. I don't think I've ever worked with people from a large firm. I mean, I know other
Yeah,
MVPs who live in that space, um, and it sounds to me working in a large firm has what I have up here, the same kind of bureaucracy that comes with a large company. So, um, one of the things I'll just point out, I'm going to throw out a topic part here, and we can talk about this for a little bit, or we can move on. But I think one of the two observations about consulting versus a FTE or full time employee. One observation about consulting is I think you get, I think it's more focused on what you work on. So in a full time FTE position, yes, there are things to get done. Yes, you got to get things accomplished for the day. But I feel like of the people I've hired under my business, and now that I'm hiring people and teaching them from corporate America into consulting, there's this level of you only really needed to work for 4 to 6.5 hours a day. You kind of could screw around for another 2 hours and not be too much loss on what was going on. And I'm serious. Like, and you come into consulting, and now that every hour you have is tracked, it's billable or non-billable
mm,
or like whatever you do. So there's a level of like responsibility that I think comes along with consulting. And so the guys that I work with or have been around in that consulting space are like, consulting is actually much more focused attention, focused focused effort, right? Because you want to be doing a good job for the client. You don't want to be just billing them willy nilly. Like so, it is an intentional kind of a hyper focus, right? If you're putting 8 hours of work in for that day, it's a solid 8 hours of work, and you better be like doing stuff that's productive towards whatever you said you were going to sell to the client. Now, that's how I want to run my business. So I have a very intense focus on doing that. And I'm not sure all consulting firms do that, but I feel really bad for consulting firms that just they kind of just bill things and it just kind of happens, right? So I don't. I'm very
it,
focused on what
yeah.
are we delivering. Not that you
There's
aren't
there.
in a company, but I think there's a little bit more fluff
You
inside
scratched a
companies.
little bit of rust off the brain there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you want to find people that, and it is kind of a shift if you've never had the experience
Yes.
to understand that all of your time is going to be billed against somebody. So yeah, I mean, it's an awkward transition where it pushes your mind back from distraction or
Yep.
whatever
Yep.
because you're providing value to somebody that is directly paying for every minute of your time.
Yes.
And when you know some of those rates, yeah,
And
you
it's the
should,
yep, and it's the
you know,
difference of like, okay, I'm working on something on my cube. Like this, I'm thinking through
yeah,
corporate world versus I'd be working on something on my cube, and someone would come by and say, "Hey, I got a question about XYZ thing you're working on." It may have been it's part of my job to assist them and to help them out in an FTE type position, right? Yeah, you have a question about this report, no problem. Let's talk about it. But it takes your focus away from what you were working on, which was like your boss's objectives of XYZ things that you're gonna need to get done, right? So yes, it's still part of your job. Yes, you're doing that, but like in the consulting space, you don't want that kind of behavior, right? So,
yeah,
every hour or every minute that I'm running to go get a coffee or I'm talking with a colleague about solving some problem on a different project, I'm technically not billing their project, but I'm helping them out to get their stuff done. But that's also taking time away from me to work on my project and what I'm doing. So I think your focus kind of shifts a little bit there, and that's one of the points I would make.
And I would say that's really for any agency or consulting firm because that what you guys are explaining to me sounds exactly like my time in the marketing firm
Yep.
where we
Yes.
had the set hours, the
Yep.
retainer,
Yep.
or the set
yeah.
hours. Like you have to work 5 hours on this, so
Yep.
we have to show 5 hours that we did this, and here's the
But
deliverables.
just saying you work
So
5 hours is not helpful. It's like you have to be
no,
like,
no, no,
"Okay, what
yeah,
did I
you have to
do
show
in
to your
5
boss,
hours?" Yes,
right?
show
And
like, I
right,
ran this analysis, I pulled these numbers, I
yeah,
did this thing. There's a physical output
the
that you're
statement of work doesn't say
Yes.
work,
Yes.
so
Yes,
work
exactly
hard.
right.
Right, and it
100%.
has those set deliverables. Yeah, I mean, I think that's universal between anytime you're getting hourly or
Yes.
the statement of work compared to something in house.
Yep.
So I guess from the business intelligence, the Power BI space, then let's talk about that in terms of like from the in-house Power BI world.
Mhm.
I think depending on how much you've adopted it, you did hit on a point that I do want to kind of focus on is where you do have your tasks and your projects that you're working on in house, but you also get that plethora of, hey, this is broken, or hey, can you fix this, or hey,
Yes.
can you update this? And then you also are kind of at the mercy of any executive. Something's broken. We need to pull this from our database
So
now.
so this is where there's a big distinction,
Mhm.
at least in my mind,
Yep.
right? Big consulting firms, like they have dev shops. It's got to be almost very similar to being an FTE, in a large corporation.
Mhm.
The only distinction is you're doing time tracking, and I think in consulting there's this added, the more certifications you get, the more like value you present as an individual, the more valuable you are to the business because they'll charge more for your time, right? Like
Mhm.
in terms of all of the experiences that you're starting to dive into, Tommy, not everybody gets that when they have
Right.
consulting, behind their in their resume,
Right.
depending on the size of the firm. Now, I think you do bring up one of the distinct qualities, or differences I think is extremely valuable or can be, is in a small to medium sized firm, if you're presented with opportunities, like consulting is you selling your skills because
Mhm.
you're an expert, or you know this one thing really, really, really well, or you're behind, a touted expert. Like your lead is the go-to
Correct.
person. If you're utilizing the opportunity in consulting, you can learn sales, you can learn presenting, like the qualities, early engagement and needs of a customer, right?
Mhm.
Because they're in the market to
Mhm.
have a consulting firm solve a very focused problem, and they're going to go find a place that they think can solve that problem the best. They're
Yes.
probably going to have a couple firms, right? So they put out a
Re-
request,
Request for proposal
or
or something like that.
yeah, for proposals, putting together a proposal. Like all of these things are things you'll never get in an FTE realm, right?
Yep.
Like, and there's no point. But I think one of the biggest things is in those types of environments, consulting teaches you that if you invest in yourself as an individual,
Mhm.
you bring more value to the company, because it's a direct, like, hey, your hourly rate just went up because you passed the Power BI 101 test, right? Hey, your rate went up because now you're Azure certified. Hey, like, so there's these quantifiable things that all of a sudden in your head it clicks, where it's like, oh my goodness, like if I actually, continue with learning above and beyond just what I'm learning in a narrow scope at my job, I'm actually providing more value. And it was a huge transition point for me in understanding that, hey, as an individual, the more I invest in myself, the more valuable I am, no matter where I am.
Mhm.
It doesn't matter if I'm at a company or consulting or whatever. And I think that that's something that, regardless of where you are,
Yeah.
like why we keep pushing a learning mentality, because we've all learned
Right.
that the more time you invest in yourself above and beyond just like your experience, and that could be consulting or FTE, the more valuable you're going to get. And um, that transition, between consulting to FTE on the flip side is, while an FTE may not have like the time tracking, you kind of have to manage your own growth sometimes,
Mhm.
depending on who your manager is. But I
Mhm.
think the breadth of your experience and the time to learn new things is something that an FTE position offers up that sometimes consulting doesn't, because you can get very, very pigeonholed. Like if you're a Power BI person and you're good at like building reports for CRM, that's what you do, man. Like you
Yeah.
literally just are going to build Power BI reports for CRM tools. And that can be very limiting because you're just going to be repetitively trying to sell the same types of things over and over and over, or you're going to get a breadth of experience and people are going to come to you to the thing, and you're not going to be able to learn the Azure suite or work with different tools, or, there's a little bit of that. But I think what I found is you're doing a lot of the same thing because you're supposed to be the expert, mind you, right?
Mhm.
Right.
Like you're companies are paying top dollar so you guys can solve a problem very quickly, right? And with FTEs, more often than not, every company would love to have their own folks learn and do things. Sometimes you just need to accelerate and use an outside company, consulting firm.
Yeah.
But in general, there are a lot more opportunities, I think, in FTE roles, depending on the size of the company, that you can branch out and learn things or have the time to absorb. But it's all about like, are you taking advantage of the learning? I think.
I think that's actually a perfect point, and I think for the in-house, it's depending you have more flexibility to be known or develop different skills, but you have to take that initiative
Yeah,
in-house.
I would totally agree with that.
And also because again, it's not like, hey, I want to learn this in a consulting firm. It's like, well, you're getting billed for this, and this is where we need the hours. But if you can position yourself, and I think there's a currency for someone in-house, it's not necessarily an hourly rate where that's how you'd value someone from the consulting side. I think it's the time. So I think someone in-house can build their skills, but they are recognized not based on an hourly rate in terms of their stature. It's basically their ability to, are they basically getting asked to do reports? Is that their role? Or are they in a sense of a leadership to kind of look at the company, understand different things? And I think it's easier to go that route from in-house if you have the buy-in, if you have that vision. I can't tell you from my own personal experience, we not that we treat every department like a client, but we kind of look at each client. We have monthly meetings with each department, each sub department. We're looking at things we could do better. We're seeing their pain points, and I mean, like, what even though I'm not going through like each part of Azure and we
Mhm.
don't have all the different scenarios that you would have in consulting. And I think that's something consulting does offer, because when you're an expert in something, like, you are going to have to deal with every different type of data situation that you ever had. Incremental refresh, hybrid tables, those are going to be big needs depending on the company.
Yep.
Generally in house, it's not necessarily the same situation, but you're not going to have that plethora of data scenarios, so to speak.
I feel it.
It depends. It depends
Yeah.
on
Yes.
the company, your
Sure.
role, like what you're going to be doing, right?
Oh,
Like, are you in a place that is like the same? It's going to
yep.
be the same thing every
Right.
single day. Or are you in a place that allows you to expand, allows you to learn new things, allows you to grow, right? And those, I think, are the keys you got to figure out. Like, just as much, like, maybe the conversation circle up here would be, um a transition between these roles is interesting, but I think the value in me going back to an FTE position was I made sure that it was a good relationship. I made sure that the
Mhm.
company I was going to engage with was going to be able to offer me the same types of learning.
Yeah.
Like, I can grow in this area, I can learn new things, and make it valuable. And that's a quid pro quo kind of thing. And most people don't kind of get that, like, hey, you need to be just as selective in what company you engage with or want to be part of, and make sure it's a good fit for you, as a company is looking for a valuable individual. So how do you bring those things to the table? Well, the more time you invest in yourself, the more valuable you become to a business, right? The
Mhm.
more negotiating power that you have, because you know more, you have more experience. In the same way, you can start to look for and make sure that those same traits that you have or want to experience within a company are there, and that they can meet your needs as well.
I think I want to be very clear. I don't think one of these roles is better than the other. I think they're just
I agree.
serving. I think they're very much needed in both places. I think there's no in my mind there is no um downside to picking either one of these. I think just these are just like general observations that I'm seeing of like what is the differences between these kind of roles. And one of the differences that I think is very key here is like the volume of challenges you experience, I think at a higher pace. So I talked
Mhm.
earlier about like, you know, in consulting there's just more of this hyper focused attention to I'm billing my hours, I want to be good to the client. I have these clear deliverables that we're doing, right? I've never done so much sprinting and agiling than I have in consulting. It's a lot more around What are you working on? What are we delivering? Like that's in companies they'll say we do sprint and agile, but
yeah,
but you really
You
need
can
to
push
do
it
it.
back.
Yeah, but they do it, but they just say the words, right? They're not actually trying to deliver things. People aren't really grooming things down right. We're not actually doing like putting story points on things. There's very few occasions where I've seen like inside companies where we've had really like, yes, they do it. It probably works, but like I think the rigor of that methodology works a lot better in consulting because then I can say, yes, okay, here's our Friday deliverable, and we're expected to come back to the company and give them, here's what we produced. These are the tables we made. These are the data
there's
models we created. So I think
there's a
there's a
bit of
level
that
there
though.
that's a
Like
different too.
the mix is I 100% agree with you on like yeah, we do agile, we do sprint. And do you? Right, you sure about that?
Yeah.
Right. The flip side with consulting though is you're almost getting put under the gun before agile, and that's kind of the
Yeah.
wrong way to do it, right?
Yes, I
Because
agree.
essentially you have technical leaders or people with a lot of experience, and this
Mhm.
is where I think consulting is fantastic if you're in a role that allows you to do the early engagement.
Mm.
The early engagement with
Mm.
customers, the sitting down with executive teams, figuring out what their needs, like why are they bringing you in? Like those are the super valuable types of things that if you're, able to get into consulting, like, and have those experiences, taking away like that meeting, going and building a statement of work,
Mhm.
right? Like
Yep.
all of the things in there, estimating what that full project is going to be. And that's where it kind of goes off the rails, right? Like, because if you're agile, like
Yep.
you'd basically
You don't
take
have
that
one.
take that away.
Yep.
Right.
You'd go back to the team, figure out all the pieces you'd have to, put into play. And
Yep.
depending on the firm, right? Sometimes maybe you're doing that. Sometimes you're just ripping out sows. Um, but the fact is like you're throwing an estimate and a dollar amount because the business isn't going to engage with you without some sort of litmus of like,
Correct.
how much
Right.
is this going to cost me?
Yeah, exactly
You
right.
know,
Yeah. Are we
and
talking like, $10,000 or is
right.
this like a $50,000 project? We don't
So
know.
so in some degree, you're then going to the team and being like, okay, here's your timeline and here's your estimates and here's your. So
Right.
yeah. I think the value is all of this is well thought out.
Correct.
Everything about the project is talked about over ad nauseum initially so that you
I
make
agree.
sure you understand it or at least give yourself enough time
Mhm.
and then try to execute underneath it. But yeah, the the pre-work and thinking I think is sometimes um skipped or
Or glossed
in
over, or
Well,
bigger
there's a little
bigger
bit of
things.
hand
Yeah.
waving maybe in
Yeah.
companies. FTEs
yeah.
maybe get a bit more
Yeah.
hand waving. They're like, oh yeah, we know we need Power BI. I mean, yeah, we know we need governance. Oh yeah, sure, Seth will handle that, and just hand
Yeah.
wave it,
Right.
and then we're off to the next thing.
Well,
Like, what does that mean? That's like
yeah.
three-quarters of work.
Whatever. Okay,
Like,
go.
Right.
yeah.
Well, and the difference is in how you can say, "Oh, we'll get this to you by March,"
Hmm.
right? Compared to 20 hours, right? Where it's not necessarily like something you could push back. There's other priorities at the company. Every client is the priority to themselves.
Yes.
So I want to take that experience, specifically Power BI or in this
Yeah.
space. If you were to take again two identical twins who both had the same experience in Power BI, same age, same demographics, etc. One went right into consulting at medium
Mhm.
size kind of thing, and one went in house being the Power BI designer and vision for the company. After 5 years, are they still like immediate family, or are they like long lost second cousins? How similar are they in terms of their experiences, their pain points, their skills? And their ability to basically, take a solution or take a problem, develop the solution, then build it from the technical side. How similar would they be able to work together?
I think they could totally. I mean, this is a very relative question because there's so many different kinds of large organizations. There's so many different kinds of consulting
Mhm.
firms. So, what again? I'm going to step back on kind of what my experience has taught me. Right, when I was in a large company, I had a very narrow window of understanding around like what data they were working on and what data was relevant to them. Now that I'm in consulting and I'm at the front end of the side of consulting, like I'm the
Mhm.
architect, the principal architect,
Right.
right? I'm talking to all the clients, I'm getting all like the requirements in, I'm doing the estimating, I'm doing all the things that would be, what we were talking about earlier about pure consulting pieces, those opportunities to go deeper with those projects. The amount of data and exposure I get into now is phenomenal. Like I'm in more, I'm in almost every industry. There isn't too many industries I haven't been touching, like financial industry, the energy sector. small medium business tech. There's just basically healthcare, like the major sectors I'm playing in. But you don't necessarily get all of that if you're in a
Right.
company. Typically, that company centers itself around a specific sector, and so the breadth of exposure and what I think I've observed now is data is data. Doesn't matter what sector you're in. They all have needs. They all have a production system. Everyone needs a data warehouse, regardless of where you go. And you now have more patterns of solving these continual problems. Not to say that, I'm thinking about like Chris Wagner, right? Chris Wagner acts like a liaison, a contractor inside his entire company. He helps out many different departments with his role inside um, Rockwell Automation. Like that's his job is to help other teams kind of continue and refine things and keep. So I definitely think he has a lot of those same experiences, but again, he only has the experience of his company's data, and when you start going into
Mhm.
other industries or other companies, I think you get another flavor of what's going on there. So I would say their scales are going to be fairly comparable. I think the consultant's going to have a bit more of a well-rounded view of what data can do in many different companies and different organizations. So I think they might have a bit more um, of a challenge there as well, right? So there's going to be, I think, growth in that area. On the flip side, I think the people who are FTVs, they're going to deal with more internal politics. They're going to learn how to negotiate their career inside a large company. So there's a lot of drama that goes along with some of these big companies, and leadership can make or break a department. If you're in a department that has a leader that is forward thinking, pushing people, moving to newer technologies, you will do that. If you have a leader in your department that is, we are SQL on-prem all the time, that's what we do, that's all you're going to work on. So your experience
Yeah.
level is limited based on what I think your leadership is willing to take from a threshold from a risk standpoint. The consulting space is you're coming into these situations and you're helping companies move from a safe place potentially to a new place or a risky place. So you're trying to get them from point A to point B. That's just my experience. And I'll pause there and let Seth and maybe throw some words out here.
Your last point was really interesting because it typically, consulting firms are actually pushing the bounds of
Yes.
technical stacks,
Agreed.
with a lot of companies because still, even with cloud, like companies are slow to adapt.
Yep.
And
I would
and
agree.
that was one thing that like you're trying to create, you know, um, some comfort,
Yeah.
for those people to take that leap
Yep.
and you're gonna help them make that leap. Um, in several factors, I think, Mike, you're spot on. The consulting, maybe it's the there's a hyper focus on the additional stuff, right? Like
Mhm.
it's kind of like, yes, we expect you to do 8 hours, and you're going to bill 8 hours a day,
Mhm.
and there is definitely this like you're on the bench versus making the company money
Mhm.
because you always want to be making the company money, so you realize that your hours are valuable.
Correct.
And but at the same time, then there are expectations. It's not just consulting. Smaller companies get breaks and things like that with more certified people that have different levels of Microsoft certification. It eases with the licensing and things like that. So there's company. I've been in companies before where it's been recommended or you get a bonus or something for passing a certification because there's a company value to that,
Correct.
and there is with consulting firms as well. But there's maybe it's the motivation, right? Like in consulting, it's you're always on, you're working for a company, you're working for, a client, you're bettering yourself. There's a path forward, and the prompt or there's always somebody kind of encouraging you to better yourself, right? And maybe that's a distinction where
Mhm.
i- you need to make sure you're in a FTE space that like somebody's encouraging you
Mhm.
to keep learning, keep
Yeah.
keep growing yourself, even though it might not like tie directly to a certification. Are you learning? Are you growing? And are you taking the opportunities in those positions? And I think maybe sometimes the downside of the FTE in regards to that is you're in a position where nobody's going to push you,
Mhm.
right? You have a job, but unless you take the initiative, then you have to be a self-starter,
Yes.
right? And maybe
Mhm.
that's the big distinction with a lot of folks because not everybody is, you know, just tied in. They want to sit down every day and learn more about Power
See,
BI.
this is going a little. I'm actually surprised on your guys' opinions on the independent the consultant, because I was going to say that my assumption was the consultant would be more well-rounded, know a lot of different skills and tools, which I think is generally the case. The one thing that, Mike, you highlighted is that the consultant is like, if you are in-house and your company doesn't have work with supply chains,
Yep.
odds are you're never going to see what a good supply chain
Nope.
data model looks
Nope.
like, or what it should be, right?
And you only know
Nope.
the supply chain that you guys have been given in your company.
If
So
you
like,
even have,
Right.
right, you don't,
so you may have one, but it may be just not functioning
right, what's a
optimally.
best practice
What's
kind of thing. You're going
exactly
to
right?
see those experiences.
Correct. It's the
So,
other experiences I think go along with that.
right. So
hmm
you're kind of like, oh, I've seen this before, basically.
Yes.
Now, on the other token, what Seth said, which I actually think is true, is in-house, if you want to look, like, let's say you have a project, it's dealing with something, within Power BI or kind of some other tool. If you say this is a good solution for us, you can take the time to learn it. That's not, on a day that's not, that you don't have to worry about being billed. You're not tasked with like a consultant, like, hey, you're the Power BI developer guy. You build the data model. This is what you do. If you suggest, hey, I can do Power Apps too, well, maybe there's not a need for that, so you're not going to really have that
Yeah, you have
experience,
you
right?
have to sell the thing in order to work on
You
it.
have to sell the thing. You have to show
Right.
your experience. So I think the in-house has more opportunity, not necessarily to know more tools, but to become more,
You
I
can
guess
play more. You
you
can
can play more.
definitely play
Yeah, you can
more,
definitely
right?
play
Like if you have
more.
and this is where a lot of the
Yeah.
really cool Power BI stories come from. Like there's a Power Apps, that one where the guy was at the
Yeah.
airline,
Mhm.
right? And he's in their analytics space or something, or a developer. Like you have an idea of how to better a business, and a business is going to be like, well, yeah, man, like, yeah, it's a problem, but we don't have time to like solve for it. Like, hey, if you can get me this license, I want to toy around with solving this business
Mhm.
problem.
Yep.
Like, dude, yeah, right. I think the myth here is, if people think that going into consulting is going to open this, cornucopia of tools and opportunities and different things, like, no, it doesn't by default do that,
Correct.
right? It's you going and learning that while you're consulting, while you're
Mhm.
doing all these things that like could be the value of learning those tools. But in terms of experience, I think it still rests on engaging with business, understanding how our activities impact businesses. But that's a niche part of, you have to be on the delivery side and not just development side of a consulting firm. And in terms of just like Mike, you said different industry experience,
Yep.
absolutely.
Yep.
Like something you'll get better in
Yeah.
consulting than an FTE for
Yep.
sure.
Yep.
Um, but it's not like, there is this kind of, I think, misconception of what consulting offers, because it's not like the be all end all of everything. It's just,
Nope.
hey, this firm is going to definitely lean into you for learning.
Yes.
So if you're not, when you do your 8 hours billable, plan on the next 2 to 3 hours of something you're doing that's learning. The downside of that is, it's definitely technology and tool focused
Yes.
versus solving problems focused,
Mhm.
right? And I think with an FTE, maybe it's, we don't do it you don't do enough of technology tool focused, and you're doing too much like solutioning for the business kind of focus.
hmm
And if you can marry those two things, it's a recipe for real success, is answering, like, solving some business problems with a new tool or something that you're interested in, and then serving that up and saying, hey, business, by the way, like, I'm super valuable, I just solved this problem for you, but you need this new tool to do it. you know
I know.
See, you
But
can do that. Just get some problems with your family because you'll never see them.
well,
But
I think
dude,
So
if
if you
because
think,
there's not enough.
throw
Yeah.
throw travel into this,
yeah,
Yeah.
throw like a whole bunch of other things. Like, if you think you have if you think you work too much as an FTE, don't assume going into
there's
consulting is
going to
all
be
of a sudden
less.
going to solve that
Right.
No,
problem, right?
I
Like,
would
you
say I
need to
work.
draw your boundaries regardless of where
Yeah, I
you're
work
at.
harder
Yeah.
more now as a consultant than I do
Oh,
as a FTE.
because
For
yeah,
sure.
but you also own your own business,
I also own my
right?
yeah. So I
Which
also own
also
my business.
ramps up the, the stress levels of listen, you're on the hook for everything,
Yeah.
right? And as a consultant, you also want your consultants to feel that way
Yes.
because technically, I think the answer, like one of the big distinctions we haven't made is as a consultant, you have to have the answers.
Mhm.
Mhm.
You're the answer person. Like
Yep.
people are coming to you with questions and you have to have the answer.
Yes.
Whereas with an FTE, it's like, hey, do you know this? No? Okay, go learn it. Right.
And
Or go tell me how it works.
well, and but also too, I want to bring a point here that you guys have been touching around, but I think I want to solidify a thought in my mind that when you guys talked about it was, inside the walls of an FTE, those companies have the perceived value of whatever infrastructure we've invested in, whether it be SQL, whether it be on-prem, whatever those servers are. There's a perceived quantity of money, like we've invested X number of dollars and time around that, and there's this idea of, I guess it's called sunk costs, right? The sunk cost concept, right? The likelihood I'm going to try something new after I know how much I've already invested in this current thing is much less. And I think the risk for consulting firms to come in is much less than the company, right? If I'm a consulting firm, I come in and say, "Yeah, you should move everything to the cloud." It's little to no risk for the software company or the consulting firm to recommend that to the company. Yes, it may be better, and here's the reason why. For this, and this, you can do these things faster. You can bring down your OpEx costs or your CapEx. Like the consulting firm can come in and make a case for something to change, but the consulting firm really has no loss if that goes well or not well, right? So they can just basically, oh, it didn't work
True.
out. Sorry.
Yeah.
See you later, Mr. Client. I'm gonna go find the
Right.
next client. Like, and so you have the opportunity as a consulting firm. You have to be very trusting. And I think one of the major things that I get really bent out of shape on here is consulting firms has to have incredible amounts of integrity
Mhm.
because you have to be able to come in and say what you're gonna do. And you literally are. They say this, but I don't think everyone does it. You're
Yeah.
literally partnering with the company, the client, and saying, "I'm in this struggle with you. We will figure out a way to get
Right.
this thing better, and I can't leave you in a position where you're in the lurch." Like you have it. I'm not sure
And
every company
yeah.
does that.
I would 100% agree with that, right? And I would say as someone who's been on both sides, it is very important for the company hiring a consulting firm to vet the team, not just the individual, and interview
Mhm.
them like with a technical expert on your side.
Yep.
And if you don't have one, hire one to vet
Yep.
because there are absolutely consulting firms that will
Bait and switch
like
you.
their game is to get as many
Well,
contracts and
yeah.
whatever signed in, right? Like,
They
are
have
they
a
bringing their
template.
A game? Do they have they done this before?
Mhm.
Like, do they have the experience to solve your problems? Because I think there's this misconception like any consulting firm is the expert, and like, is it? Or did they hire junior off the street, teach him, Power BI for 3 months, and then now he's in your production system solving some of your biggest problems, right? Like vet these people because to Mike's point, like there absolutely needs to be a listen, we're we understand your problem and we are going to help you solve that problem. Um, but that's typically why you're going to pay higher prices
Yep.
for better consultants because they
Yep.
bring that experience, they bring the problem solving, and they can answer your problems as opposed to being, I think I saw a chat on site like the contractor in the wing, right? Like
Mhm.
treat them as you would your normal FTE. Like, are they a developer or are they the solution architect, right? Do they have the experience? Are they the one working on the project, right? Like all of those are due diligence steps that companies need to make because yeah, there are firms out there or you get into a stack where people are really busy around and it depends on like what are the resources that are going to be working on your systems
Yes.
and how important are they, because if it's junior, like maybe the rate should be less than what you're charging me,
Right.
so there are definitely those kinds of interactions, and it's also how you gain reputation within the business or within the industry is versus lose it as well.
So there's a lot of good points here, and I want to mention a few in terms of kind of being on a little of both sides now. From the in-house, I've seen the whole gambit of consulting firms. Large ones who literally had a template that was not necessarily best for the business. The ones who kind of go way more in depth than they need to, and I think from the client side, like why am I satisfied or dissatisfied with the client? And that's what's really helped me right now, just with even on the side thing, because understanding that you're right. You're not just, dishing out the same product boilerplate template every time.
Yes.
They're hiring you because they want something unique for them that they can get anywhere else. On the same side of it, in-house, you almost the selling thing we've talked about, like, yeah, you learn really how to sell as a consultant. Well, I've seen this too many times where someone brings the consultant in, and because they're consultant, they're listened to, well, they're the experts. And not knowing like who is already on the team, they just didn't have the time to
Oh
do
my gosh.
something.
I've done this.
Yeah. And
I've been in this
yeah,
conversation before. This is I know where you're going with it. Keep going.
yeah, and it's basically like, well, no, well, they said we should do that because we're paying them. Because it's like, well, you're also paying this team,
Well,
or you're paying, yeah.
the best part
And
about this
you
is
really gotta sell it.
the consultants come in and asks the employees so the consultants come in, ask the FTVs, what do you think is going on here? And the FTEs say, well, we have too many product SKUs. We need to reduce the number of product SKUs. It's too complicated to manage everything. It's causing, all kinds of supply chain issues. Then the consultants turn around and write it up in their report and say, we recommend you use less SKUs in your products because it's XYZ and adds this complexity here and here and here. And then management goes, we should now use less product SKUs because the consultant said da 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 da.
Right.
And you're
Even
like, why don't you just listen to your employees? They've been saying this
right.
for weeks or months or years, and we're not listening to the internals. But the fact that it came from this expensive thing that we paid for, that is what we must do. And like,
That's very true.
I think
I've been around that
you raise
situation.
an interesting point, because as a consultant you can walk into a shop and you
Yeah.
know whether or not somebody understands what they're doing there or they
Oh,
don't,
totally.
right?
Yes.
And that can tailor how you're going to help the company. On the flip side, there is what's fun as a consultant is walking into a shop where the people do know what they're doing and they just don't have the time to do this one thing that you're being hired to do. But I think those are the opportunities as a consultant that you can really help out um, individuals like that by reinforcing just how good they are at their job and how valuable they are to the business. Because in those cases, maybe it's the manager who's the problem,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like if that's not a widely known thing and they're taking consulting advice over the person who's saying the exact same thing,
Yep.
who's in their own house. Like I know I've used many opportunities to be like, hey, did you know so and so? Like this is exactly their thinking as well, right?
Yeah.
And they're spot on. And like and the eyes start going, oh really? Oh, that's fantastic,
Yep.
right? You use those opportunities if you have them to really bolster
Yeah.
internal resources, because um it's those hardworking individuals that should be garnering that respect right off the gate too.
I mean, you're at the end of the day, you're in the service industry. So like
Yeah,
what I tell people,
100% you are.
what I if from a consultant perspective, like it's not only you're selling your knowledge, you're not only selling capability. Like, hey, we're gonna come in, we're gonna build XYZ things. Where you're gonna be able to do this new thing that you never done before, right? That's kind of what you're selling as a consulting. But you're also selling the how do I work with these people? Do I get a good feeling
Yeah.
with working with this person? Do I feel like I can trust them when we were on a phone call with them? Do they understand what I'm talking about and can relate it to something that's
Are
like
they listening?
tangible? Are
Yeah.
they listening?
Yeah.
Right? So my thing here is like, consulting firms that come in and like, well, we're the best at whatever we do. I don't think so. I don't think you are. No consulting firm is the best at whatever they do. There's always another consulting firm, and frankly, you can go out and get your own certifications. You can have your internal employees learn everything that the
Yeah.
consultants know by
Certs don't mean
Google.
everything.
So I definitely think there's this equalizer here, right? The internet has equalized a lot of this knowledge space, right? And so I got into Azure development or anything like web apps, app dev, all that stuff, just because I started building my own website from scratch. I started learning things in there and then started researching more stuff. I mean, the internet's a wealth of knowledge, and Microsoft, it's in their best interest to make sure everyone knows all the products, all the services, get all the free training you can get, because that just means people use their stuff more. So if you think that way, right, now you stop engaging with consulting firms that are just there because they need to. Like, now you start looking for who's going to give me the good experience, who's adding real value to my company inside that consulting firm, and that's what you should be looking for when you look for consultants, because you are paying them a lot of money and they should be bringing value, but they should be doing it with a smile, and you should enjoy working with them. If it's not, I'd argue you should go look for somebody else.
Yeah. I the other interesting thing I caught in here as well is if I were looking for it's funny how companies go out into the consulting field, right?
Yeah.
They're like, I have a budget. This is what I want to pay.
Sure.
Well, be mindful, right? That
Mm-hmm.
with that budget, right? Like you're either capping the level of expertise that you get,
That's true.
or you should branch into like who you think are the best firms, who might be the most expensive, the medium, and low. And what you should see
You
is
kind of pay for what you
the
get. You get
the
what you pay
the
for.
the estimates from the low and medium should be higher than the highest paid one,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like just because they're more expensive, they should also probably be solving your problem faster than the other one,
I agree with that too.
right? So in the spectrum of, and that's the nice thing with shopping around to consulting firms and
True.
things like that, you have, but there's typically time windows and stuff on that as well. But either way, you know, um, valuable experiences can be found in both,
I would totally agree.
right? Like you're not going to get an immediate solve your, it's the grass is always greener. You got to find the right company.
Yep.
Um, and I think the pressures in consulting can be higher because you can't miss those time frames.
Mm-hmm.
You can't, like, once you commit to something for a business, like, trust me, it just because the sow said 200 hours, when you're at 200 and you have 40 more to go, you're going to do the 40. You're just not going to get paid for them.
Yep. Yep.
Right. So that kind of pressure is not fun.
You find a lot of
And
CYA in that
yeah,
experience. Like, well,
yeah.
you asked for these 3 things and they weren't part of what we
Whereas
initially asked for.
in a,
So that took.
in a business,
Yeah.
it's like you missed the deliverable. Yeah, I know, but like
We'll get
the
it done next
business
week.
will get in a week.
Yeah.
It's
Because it's sunk
a
costs.
lot less impact because
Yes.
then you as a consultant or your consulting business has to be like, yes, we have 40 more hours and we'd like you to pay for those.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, like companies like, no, you're gonna finish the project.
Yeah, exactly. That's why it's so important. Like, yeah, there's a lot of document what you're doing, how
Right.
you're doing it, how close you're getting, and when there's roadblocks, I think you also see too, particularly from again, this is how I run things, right? When there are roadblocks, when there is things that are challenging that are harder to do, I think those issues bubble up faster because that at the end of the day potentially requires more hours. You can't only eat so many hours to make sure the project
Yeah.
comes in under time and budget. So internal to companies, I've seen stuff buried under rugs for much too long.
Yeah.
Big issues that have just been hidden, swept under the rug. Oh, we'll deal with it later. We'll just keep throwing band-aids on things. And
I
so
could talk about this topic for another hour.
Yeah.
But
And yeah.
Sorry. Go ahead, Tommy.
No, I think yeah, the consulting side is a little definitely that hyper focus, but again, I see that other side of it is if you are working in house, you are the BI, director or
Mm-hmm.
the manager of the BI vision, the data integration. Well, you don't necessarily have the same sway as consultants. So you really have to sell and be on top. Like
Yep.
I think you definitely, if you're in that position, you're definitely wearing a lot more hats of product
Yes.
manager.
Yep. I agree with
You
that.
have to see the whole thing, the roadblocks still that no, I still
so
I see
so
that.
so
Yeah.
the reason I go real quick is because I think one of the value do I think people should go into consulting? Yes. Try to get the experiences that I got, right? Where you get in front of businesses.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason I say that is because I don't necessarily think, Tommy, um that it's the FTE can't garner that respect. I think with the understanding that you get from consulting, you bring a different presence into a business.
Yeah.
You are solving problems. You are less cared about. You care less about like the politics of something.
Mm-hmm.
You care more about, are we solving the problem
Yep.
collectively?
Agreed.
Oh, this is in my area. Okay, I'm going to reach out to this person. Oh, they don't know. I'm going to go over here.
Yep.
Oh, they don't know. I'm going to go over here. Hey, I'm gonna collect all this information. I'm solving the project. I'm solving this issue. Here's the issue I'm solving. Right. That is what I think is missing if you're only in an FTE realm, because if you're only have that experience, it's probably harder to learn how to navigate some of the nuance of your company, because you're not used to just going in as the bull in a china shop and being like, hey, hi, my name is Seth, I'm here to solve all your problems as a
Right.
consultant,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Well,
And a company by default gives you a lot of like leeway,
Mhm.
whereas as an FTE you're more cognizant, like, I'm here, I report to so and so, this is the
Right.
ecosystem of whatever. And I think that's what also limits people, right? If you take a big company problem and you solve that problem, if you take the initiative, that is what I guess I don't see as much in people who are only FTEs. They don't take the initiative.
Right.
If you work under somebody who's like, take the initiative, man, take ownership, take that thing all the way. And if you want to talk to anybody in the organization, go for it, man. Like, but there's this trepidation that keep people in their own boxes
Completely
that I
agree.
think is the more of the problem, that maybe consulting breaks that box, because you understand that, like, listen, regardless of the business size, businesses need to solve the problems that matter the most to them. Are you proactively, or are you supporting that effort? And if you're proactively solving other problems, you become more valuable to that business. And the way you do that is by extending your learning or figuring out new things or diving. Like, that's the fun thing with an FTE. You have practical examples, right, of something that you can go apply a new tool or a new solution to and say, bam, I solved this huge problem. Like, then you start to shine within an
Right.
organization and garner that sort of respect, as opposed to just being the technical person that knows how to do something, right?
Mm-hmm.
And maybe that's the big distinction right there, is just like, solve the problems. Like, if you can solve the problem and do it quickly, like, regardless of where you're at, you'll succeed.
So you kind of summed up my concluding thought, but once you did say something I have to say. Um, I really think though that from the FTT, yeah, you have to take that initiative too. But unlike a consulting firm where like we're hiring this, this consulting firm to do X. Hey team, hey people, hey department, this consulting firm recommended this, so we're going to update the database here. This is the new process. This is our new thing.
Yes.
If you had that same solution in-house, well, one, who's going to listen to you if you're not above them, if you're not like the director underneath the team, if you're going cross department? Well, they go, well, why would I listen to you? If you, let's say you had to go to different departments or different teams in parallel, and you said, hey, you're going to change your process, we're going to change the database
Mm,
or update the database.
Mm-hmm.
Well, why would they listen to you? You would have to get that buy-in, where the
Yes.
consulting firm, you,
They're
by
paying for your
virtue,
buy-in. Yeah, they're paying for
yeah,
the
so
buy-in,
they're
right?
saying
Yeah,
this is what we're
totally.
going to do. So even
Yep.
if you have the solution, you have to in a sense sell it or get that
Yes.
experience
yeah, I
where
agree.
people
I
say
agree with that. I
so.
agree with
100%.
that. You're
Right.
pushing and bringing the business use case to the
And
business and
you have
saying it's
to
important.
think a
Yep.
different way.
Mm-hmm.
But I think what I want to sum up, I think what you said perfectly is, I think the skills are more similar than you would think. The difference is consulting firm or a consultant is kind of thrust into that solution management vision and build like lifestyle. I think for someone FTE, you have to be very proactive and uh, take the initiative to think that way. You could easily go through an FTE and just build what people ask you to do. But if you find the solutions and come up with the vision, tell your boss, hey, I think we could do this. Hey, this is a better
But
process.
I think
You have to seek that out.
But there's a
FTE.
hesitation there. So that there's a whole So I'm going to just touch on this for a point.
Yeah.
Like, there's a perception of the fact that the company has already invested into a certain pattern of doing the way they handle data, and the fact that sometimes you're not even given leeway to be able to do those extra things. Sometimes you are, but the other hand is like you have to have the sway to produce and
Yeah.
convince the company that what we've built, what we've produced today, is not sufficient and will no longer meet our needs. I need you guys to spend XYZ additional effort to move it or migrate it or change something. That's harder to do because now you're playing a lot more of the political game. And if your leadership doesn't trust that you're doing the right things, there's always this concept of, well, we need someone else who's had more perspective about this, right? You're asking
Mhm.
us to go to Azure SQL. Is that really the right thing that we need to do? Or maybe we should do this Lakehouse thing from Databricks. Who knows? But we know if we bring in the consultant, those are the guys that are coming in and say, here, you know, I'm going to come in and say, here's your options. 1, 2, 3. Here's why you'd want to use one or the other. And I recommend of these 3 options, this one because of cost, implementation, team knowledge, whatever that is. You expect the consultants come in, and there is this inherent kind of, we've paid you to give us knowledge so we can make an educated decision. And I think not that you can't have that at an FTE level, but I think there's this as a good or bad, right? There's a perception that those consulting firms are coming in with that level of knowledge. Whether
No,
they
and
actually have it or not, debatable.
and that's exactly what I'm saying. But you have to
So
sell 'em. Yeah.
I agree with you, Tommy, from the standpoint, and it's probably another podcast, right?
Yeah.
How within an organization do you take those innovations, to the business
Yeah, I
that
like
you
that.
can do? Like
Yeah.
there are cases where a business goes, "Oh crap, we have to solve this problem immediately and now."
Yep.
We may have resources that know how to do it, but that we can't take them off their project. And I agree that
Yep.
that's a real thing. They have a job. Um, I think in order to have some of those successes that are big in business, a business has to be clear about what its innovation ideas are for a year, right? Like what are you trying to accomplish as a business, and are you sharing that with everybody in your organization so that if they want to take that bull by the horns and try to solve that problem in different ways, they could do that, right? That's the first step in order for like somebody to come up with something and say, "Hey boss, like this solves this problem in the business. I'm going to kind of work on this on the side. And if it pans out, like, can we put together a business proposal? Because I'd love to lead that charge." Okay, well, what does that look like? Well,
Mm.
we need somebody so and so to take up these responsibilities, and this and it. And then you can plan it into like the succession of you getting in to work on the new thing
Yep.
with, hey, maybe like, yeah, that's totally an opportunity, but we need to hire a BI developer behind you
Right.
to do these things behind you so you can focus on that. And if we can do that within, what do you think, 3 to 6 months, fantastic. Let's bash it out. Let's propose it.
Man, this is another
But you
whole.
have to be
Yeah.
proactive. You have to be proactive with it more so than like a company being proactive itself and going out and finding a third party.
Oh, okay.
We should have another conversation around like, hey, how do you find innovative ideas, and how do you step up in or FTE positions,
Yeah.
much in the same way that we've had experiences with consulting, because I think there's a lot of crossover of like, like you have the extra steps and challenges in there to navigate, and some of that might be a little bit complex, but we're almost 10 minutes over our
I know.
normal time.
I'm going to say these are two topics I think are very relevant. Like one is how do you find innovative changes in a company? That's probably one that's a good topic. And then another one around that is like, and how would you sell change? How do you sell the change to your company? What's the pitch? What's it look like? How do you convince people that what you're doing is going to be sustainable? And yeah, there's a whole ball of wax with that one. Well, with
I
this
already
one,
got on the board.
I think we okay, good. I think we are officially wrapped. Thank you very much for the conversation. For those of you who have been on the YouTube chat and the LinkedIn chat, thank you very much for your participation. Your comments are awesome. It seemed like you're really thinking through this topic with us as well. We appreciate you very much. Our only ask with the Explicit Measure podcast is that you please, if you enjoyed this, if you found some value from it, learned something, maybe laughed a little bit, share it with somebody else. Give someone else a link to it and say, hey, I enjoyed this. This was good. We recommend, or we would ask that you would recommend it to somebody else. If you didn't catch it live, where else can you find the podcast, Tommy?
You can find the podcast anywhere they're available: Apple, Spotify, Overcast, Google Podcasts. Just search for us, subscribe, leave a rating on Spotify and Apple. Helps us a lot. And like I said, join us live Tuesdays and Thursdays. Our episodes drop bi-weekly,
Usually.
usually.
Awesome. Well, thank you all very much. We'll see you on Thursday.